Dan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Stan. Can you hear me?
I do hear you, Dan.
I'm actually in Renardi. Not lying, thank you. Yeah, I'm just on my way home from the
Okay.
service. But
It was very nice. It was very nice.
Beautiful.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. I'll be watching as I drive home.
It was lovely.
It was lovely.
If anyone was at Sleek House, that was lovely too. Finally, for years I've been telling my temple in New York and here not to use breadcrumbs.
Good. How are you today, Janet?
Okay, friends, good afternoon. I hope it's been a meaningful evening and morning thus far. And welcome to Yom Kippur afternoon. And although our schedule of the afternoon is slightly different this year, because of making space for all of our youth and family activities in our parking lot as well. This is an hour devoted to really personal thoughts, conversations, and delving deep in a particular topic. This year, our topic is making meaning and renewing ourselves and refocusing and rededicating our lives for deeper meaning in the year ahead. Our four speakers speak from a place of thoughtfulness and meaning and depth, but I want to make clear no one on this planet has it all figured out, including these four people. But they were picked because I felt that they thoughtfully and intentionally try to live their lives, and that their examples, both what has not worked and what has worked, might be helpful for all of us to hear. And they cover a wide age range. Our first speaker will be Zoe Steinberger. Our second speaker will be Nathaniel Bergson-Michelson. Our third speaker will be Heidi Schell. The three of them will be speaking from here in the sanctuary. And our fourth speaker, who will be coming to us via Zoom, is Stan Mainzer. The way it'll work is each of the four will speak first, one at a time. The three who are here will speak up here from the lectern. After the four have gone, then we'll take questions. So for those of us on Zoom, please posit your questions in the chat. And Karen Wazalowski, our Chief Community Officer, has been kind and gracious enough to be the transmitter of questions to me. If you're here in the sanctuary and you have a question, please pose it. I would ask you simply to stand where you are seated and to speak loudly enough that I might hear, and then I'll repeat that question for all of us to hear. We're not going to use the handheld mic simply for health reasons. So with that, I would like to introduce Zoe Steinberger, and then I guess I would ask Zoe and Heidi and Nathaniel and Stan, as you begin, just to introduce just a little bit about yourself. That might help people get a sense of what stage in life you are. Zoe. Yes, you sure can.
Hi everyone, my name is Zoe Steinberger. I'm 17 years old and I am a senior at Burlingame High School. During quarantine, I probably spent the majority of my day staring at my clock. I would set timers for the end of the school day, pace around the house just to waste time, and sit on my countertop across from my stove to watch the time change minute by minute. These days during quarantine were never ending to me, and as soon as they would end, the same exact thing would happen the next day. Quarantine was the most boring period in my life so far, but I would do anything to go back to that first day. As I said earlier, I wasted a lot of time during the pandemic, as did many people. Every Monday, I would text my friends and ask how their weekend was, and all of them would respond with some form of, I stayed at home and watched TV. Although it was normal during quarantine to basically spend the day in your house wasting time, I can't help but think about all that time that I wasted that I wish I had now. In about 10 months, I leave for college. I will be picking up everything that I've built here for the last 17 years and moving away. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very excited to experience college in a new environment with new people in a new community, but as my junior year was cut short, so was the remaining time I have left with my friends, family, and community. I wish I could go back and spend my time differently, but I know that's not possible. So instead of continuing to dwell on the past time I lost or stress about that inevitable goodbye, COVID taught me to enjoy today as much as possible. Every day is something new for me, and I make the most I can out of it. I try to spend as much as I can doing what I enjoy with people whom I love, such as attending my first in-person service at PTS for 18 months. And if I can't spend time with my community, that's okay too. I still have time to spare. Thank you so much, and Gemar Hatima Tova.
Come on up, Nathaniel. Our second speaker, Nathaniel Bergson-Michelson.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shana Tova, Gemar Chatima Tova. I'm Nathaniel Bergson-Michelson. My wife Tasha and I joined PTS about 22 years ago, just about a year before my oldest son was born. Thank you, Rabbi Feeder, for inviting me to be on this panel and the chance to do some reflection together. The Rabbi and I exchanged a couple of emails, and I told him that I found this a little bit intimidating, not speaking publicly, but the topic, focusing on deeper meaning. And it took me a while to write up my notes on this, and I didn't figure out why at first. Overall, I felt pretty lucky in this pandemic, with my older son home from college and my younger one on virtual learning last year. We unexpectedly got a lot of time together. We were playing games and talking and having fun. For me, the whole sourdough thing never happened. But from the very first day, I've been incredibly busy at work, just trying to keep the JCC open and safe and paying its employees. And so I've been able to feel a lot of pride in bringing all of my professional skills to some work that I think is genuinely important. My separation from my parents was deeply painful, but Zoom gave me a chance to connect with my niece and nephew and some old friends in some ways that were really new. And I even got to keep singing virtually with my choir and to my delight with Kenter Jar. So, in retrospect, I feel profound gratitude. But I think that's also why I found today's topic tough. On paper, at least, this year has had a lot of the elements of a meaningful life for me, maybe more than perhaps ever before, and I've been focused on those few essentials. So I guess, Rabbi, when your invitation first came, at some level I was thinking, if I'm supposed to talk about focusing more on meaning, wait, am I supposed to somehow top the experience of a global pandemic? There was something, though, in Rabbi Delson's Rosh Hashanah sermon that really resonated with me. She spoke about the need to turn that vaunted maxim on its head and not live so much just in the present moment. The last 18 months have been, for me, a series of moments, a lot of them precious, and some of them agonizing, and some of them painful, and a lot of them meaningful. But I've also been living a lot in my head. And what the time hasn't been focused on is the future, and change. Those conversations that Tasha and I used to have, what would our life be like once we're empty nesters? Well, that seemed a little silly. COVID has our boys at home and we're enjoying their company. And musing what I might want for the next stage of my professional life, that just seemed selfish. Right now I'm doing the work that I'm meant to do. Plan a big adventure? Sure, I guess. Our passports have been mostly useless, but honestly, it was all the adventure that we could stand just to figure out whether we could safely navigate a socially distanced birthday party. So yeah, I've kind of been on rinse and repeat for 18 months, living in a series of moments, but also missing a lot of that connective tissue of aspiration and of looking ahead to the future. So I'd like to try to change that. And I also sense that I've allowed myself to feel like I'm under a constant state of siege. And it's not just big picture stuff, like feeling that our democracy and our environment are out of control and we can't agree on basic public health measures. It's also that I'm encountering so many people who just seem angry, whether it's on the highway or in the grocery or on Twitter or when my JCC colleagues and I are trying to help them. It's hard to explain, but feeling under attack a lot of the time from random directions has put me into an emotional defensive crouch, I think. And it's been tough to muster the emotional energy to reach out to people that I genuinely care about. And in some ways, my life has become so circumscribed that sometimes I don't recognize it. So I'm feeling a profound need to overcome that and compartmentalize it, to know that the world right now is a little stupid and more than a little nasty, and yet engage with the world as though opportunities for radical love abound. So my work to find meaning in the next year is to savor the moments, but to look to the future, to be aware of the world's unpleasantness, but to enter and care for it nonetheless. So wish me luck. Gemar Chatima Tova.
So our first speaker reminded us of the blessedness of the open space of the beginning of quarantine and what it would be like to have that time back, and what life will be like for her a year from now as she begins college. Nathaniel has reminded us of the circumscribed natures of our life and what life is like when the present isn't ideal and the future is so very seemingly unreachable. Our next two speakers will be Heidi Schell and Stan Mainzer.
Thank you, Rabbi. So I'm Heidi Schell, and I have a 15-year-old daughter who is a sophomore in high school and happily starting her sophomore year in person versus last year. And as many of you know, I'm immediate past president here. So my 2020 started off, I thought the last 6 months of my presidency would be just sinking into retirement and resting on my laurels. And it started out with 2 clergy searches and COVID. So that made for a very exciting last quarter of my presidency. But let me start by telling you how 2020 ended for me. So, like many of you, I was ready to turn the page on the calendar and have 2020 in my rearview mirror. And December 22nd, I was coming back from the post office in San Mateo, and I was on 3rd Avenue in front of the San Mateo Main Library. And all of a sudden, I was driving, and all of a sudden there was a car that was parallel parked, and it suddenly pulled out of its parking space with no warning, no signal, and it slammed into the passenger side of my vehicle. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced your airbags being deployed, but it is violent and frightening, and it smells really bad. It makes you feel like there's a fire in your car. And the airbags went off, and I couldn't see anything. I had no control over the car. I felt it traveling across the midline into the other lane facing the wrong direction. And it was rather traumatizing. But fortunately, oh, and did I mention I had just had carpal tunnel surgery, and guess where the airbag hit? So, but thankfully, I emerged shaken, battered, and bruised from the car. But I was okay. There were no broken bones, and the last thing I wanted to do was go to the ER in the midst of COVID. Good Samaritans called the police. They came. I was taken care of. My husband picked me up, and my car was totaled. So in the days and weeks that followed, I kept anchoring myself in gratitude. I was so lucky. I was so grateful that my daughter was not in the car, that no one else was in the car with me. I wasn't hurt. The other guy wasn't hurt. Even though my car was totaled, I was going to get a new car out of it because insurance was going to pay for it. But one day I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, I was listing all the things for which I was grateful. And at the end I said, and you know what? What a way to end 2020, as if it wasn't bad enough. And I'm going to doctor's appointments and physical therapy appointments and spending hours on the phone with insurance. And I said, you know what? This is really crummy. And I realized in that moment that I mistakenly thought that anchoring myself in gratitude meant that I couldn't acknowledge the hard part of it, that somehow by acknowledging the hard part, I was either complaining or I wasn't being grateful. And what I realized is that you can hold both, and we actually need to hold both. And the trick is to be able to acknowledge the hard part without being consumed by it, while also being grateful without sweeping the bad parts underneath the rug. And I have to say my mom, who I've talked about here before, was a pillar of strength. And she went through so many challenges in her life, 3 divorces, cancer, chronic debilitating pain, and tenacity was her superpower. She plowed through things, she never complained, and I was always in awe of her for this. But I also realized she never allowed herself to be vulnerable, and she never welcomed help, and I think she actually thought it was weakness. And I realized for many of us, our superpowers are kryptonite, and her tenacity prevented her from enabling people to help her. And I think that left her in a lot of moments of loneliness and challenging times. So reflecting on this, whether it's an accident or going through COVID the last year and a half, it reminded me and reinforced for me how important our community is and how grateful I am for that community. And sharing our lives with each other, both the good and bad, are so important, and that's what community is all about. And so in terms of finding deeper meaning, I would say I'm doubling down on community, and in particular this community. And one example of that is our Mitzvah Meals program. So in partnership with Andy Zussman, Rabbi Delson, and Bev Rochelle, we really wanted to create opportunities for people to be there for each other. And we reinvigorated the program that allows people, volunteers in the community, to provide meals for other congregants who just need that extra embrace from the community. As we like to say, it's not a handout, it's a hug. And part of being community is not just showing up for other people, but also allowing ourselves to receive that hug and to be vulnerable. And within just weeks of recruiting people, we had over 40 people sign up to deliver meals. And so for me, it's really about creating opportunities for people to show up for each other and to encourage people to say, you know what, I could use that extra hug right now, and that's okay. So going forward in this year, my hope for all of us is that we acknowledge the challenges and to acknowledge the challenges, to see the silver linings, and to lean into our community. And what you spoke about last night, Rabbi Feder, really resonated with me, is that our brokenness is also part of our wholeness. And by recognizing the brokenness and allowing the light to come in, you shared that that's how God comes in. And I'd like to add to that by saying that's how community comes in.
What a great message. Thank you so much, Heidi. That was really beautiful. And we're also so very glad that you are well and that the crash wasn't worse. We're going to turn now to Zoom, and I'd like to make space for Stan Mainzer, who will be coming to us via Zoom.
Thank you, Rabbi. Can you hear me? I hope.
We sure can.
Okay, thank you. I'm Stan Mainzer, and my wife Allison and I have been members of PTS since the mid-'80s. And so we have 2 grown sons who this year will be 35 and 38. Like Nathaniel, I found this a really tough assignment because I felt it needed to be personal. And I find it difficult to talk about myself or my feelings. But here goes. I gratefully retired 7 years ago from a career where I had spent too much time away from my wife, Allison, my children, Ben and Jacob, and my community. I remember spending too many high holy days and other days in Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Helsinki, Singapore, Tokyo, Wuxi, feeling estranged and isolated. Retiring for me meant the opportunity for change, a real teshuvah, a return to things I believed more important, but which I had ignored. Many years ago, some of you may remember a TV miniseries called Roots, where Alex Haley traced the story of an African family. Some of you have probably joined Ancestry.com or 23andMe to find your own roots. Recently, Rabbi Albin organized several sessions on tracing one's ancestry. I think there's a deep-seated desire in all of us to understand from where we came and who our ancestors were. For me, Judaism is my family and my ancestry. So even before the pandemic, I had turned inward to focus my life on what it meant to be a Jew, or for what it meant for me to be a Jew. Studying Torah, some Talmud, reading scholarly articles on Jewish history, story, custom, and theology, learning with a number of different rabbis and other teachers were all meant to help me connect with my roots. When Rabbi Molly first arrived in 2015, she led a course on defining one's personal theology. From that discussion and readings she assigned, I drafted my first articles of faith. I believe in a God that created the universe. I believe in a God who does not know what we will do. I believe in a God who expects us to struggle with right and wrong. I believe in a God who wants us to choose to do good. I believe in a God of small miracles, often working through others. I believe in a God who speaks to us in a still, small voice, if we will only listen. I believe in a God who expects us to act to improve the world. And I believe in a God who is always changing, as are we. What have the last 2 years of isolation meant for me? It has meant not seeing my children and my grandchildren as I would wish. It has meant not feeling the physical embrace of those I love. It has meant not tutoring children at Lomita Park Elementary. And it has meant not rewarding myself afterwards at McDonald's with a double hamburger, no cheese, and a Coke Zero. But it has also meant more time to turn even further inward. It has meant more time to read widely, but unfortunately, more time to forget much of what I have read. After all, I am getting older. And it has given me more time to reflect how my Judaism has so much relevance to our present world. I cannot be a Jew if I don't help both my family and the stranger. I cannot be a Jew if I don't vote for the good of our country and not for my personal self-interest. I cannot be a Jew if I don't work for social justice. And I cannot be a Jew if I do not cry for a world that desperately needs healing. So miraculously, as I have turned ever more inward, I have, in my own way, during these pandemic years, also turned outward. Gemar Chatama Tova. May you be written for good in the book of life. Thank you.
Stan, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. And I'm really so very surprised about your McDonald's stops. I didn't know about that. Okay, if folks who are here would like to pose a question, I will open it up. If folks on Zoom would like to submit a question, please go ahead and do that. I'm going to pose the first question, and with all of these questions, only those who would like to speak from the panel. If you don't have something you feel like adding, no pressure to speak. But just following up on what Stan offered, I want to pose, during this past 18, 19-month experience, where does either Judaism or where does God fit in for you? And if you'd like to come up and speak, come on up.
So it's an interesting question for me. Working at a Jewish institution, it's a little bit like I've heard my Israeli friends describe life in Israel. You don't have to think about it. What we do at work is Jewish, but there's been a lot of. I've been finding, as we've come through these last 18 months, there have been questions that have arisen constantly. Questions of ethics, questions of how we care for our community, that are tough questions, things that are not easily resolvable. And so being at an institution that has in its DNA a set of Jewish values that we can return to has been incredibly important. Whether it's what exchange do we make between safety and the ability to bring people into community and into healing, whether it's what are our obligations to our employees, whether it's how do we strive to take care of the most vulnerable people in our community and still ensure that the institution remains present and solvent. So that's been being able to draw on wisdom and values that speak to communal life has been incredibly important.
Okay, well, as a teenager who doesn't really have a fully developed mind yet, especially a fully developed mind based on Judaism, I didn't really think about Judaism a whole lot during quarantine, especially as somebody who doesn't attend weekly services. I only really attend services through the Jewish Education Program or through the High Holy Days program. I don't really think a lot with like a filter on Judaism, but over the summer I went on the Nifty Teen Tour to Israel, and that was life-changing for me, and it really helped me view COVID through a Jewish lens. We had a speaker during one of our weeks in Israel, an ultra-Orthodox older man, and he said to us, he was talking to us about Tikkun Olam and how important it is to help your fellow Jews. And he said something along the lines of, remember to help your fellow Jews. It's more important than helping other people. And that really surprised me, just because I was thinking, I know it's important to help people in my community, and Jewish people are my community, but why would I put helping a Jewish person above helping a non-Jewish person? And it really stuck with me. And especially as somebody who participates in a lot of Tikkun Olam, I've kind of tried to not only help Jewish people in my community, but also make it a part of my life to help non-Jewish people and help people who might not necessarily be aware of Tikkun Olam and what the values are in Tikkun Olam and how it affects people. And through COVID, I think Tikkun Olam has become a bigger part in my life. And I think that, sorry, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I think COVID has really impacted how I see daily things through a Tikkun Olam point of view, especially my non-Jewish friends. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Okay, our next question, and those three answers were beautiful. This comes from Pam Kaufman. Has your definition of community changed in the last 18 months? Has your definition of community changed? And if so, how? Any takers? We'll start with Stan. Heidi, you can come up and be the next.
No, I would say that my definition of community hasn't changed, but my ability to interact with my community has changed. One of the things which Allison and I did regularly was attend Friday night services, and it is very comforting to be with a group of people whom you know well and with whom you pray weekly and who you schmooze with afterwards. And these things are very satisfying, and it gives something to which to look forward. We've had to move that experience to Zoom, which has been good. In fact, it's been good because there are some people who maybe couldn't attend or couldn't drive to services, but can attend over Zoom. So we've had maybe greater attendance, but it has lacked the physical presence, and so community is a physical presence as well. So I think that's how it's changed for me.
That sense of community when, as Stan pointed out, that we couldn't be together. And thank goodness for Zoom that we were able to be with each other. But it's really what prompted me to start thinking about how can we still connect as a community when we cannot be together. And that's partly what led to the Mitzvah Meals. Participating in the outreach that Karen and others organized in terms of volunteers calling every single household in our community last year. And it also what inspired the creation of Beyond the Bima, our new podcast, as a way for us to, how do we still get to know each other and learn about each other and connect with each other when we can't be together in person? And I'll share one story, which is really what inspired the podcast, is I was making calls during Hanukkah to some of our seniors who were in retirement facilities and senior living facilities, and I spoke with one gentleman who was about to turn 100. He had just lost his wife a couple of months before and had the most amazing positive attitude, and he explained to me that until the pandemic, he had actually been managing all the volunteers who ran the information desks at SFO Airport, and here he is just shy of his 100th birthday. And I thought, oh my gosh, we have these gems of people in our community, and we need to know about each other and share those stories. So for me, community, the definition hasn't changed, but it's more about how can we keep digging deeper into our community, especially as we go through these uncertain times of being together. It doesn't mean we can't still connect with one another.
I think You know, I've been working in JCCs for about 15 years, and they're wonderful places. They're lively places. They're full of life, and so it was very, very hard on March 13th when we shut things down, and it was a dead campus. I've never seen anything like it. As we started being able to open things up a little bit at a time, the way that people responded, the need that it fulfilled for people, the vital lifeline that just being able to come someplace and see people and connect, it was very powerful. It really sharpened for me, why do we do this work? But also, you know, that word community that we use so broadly in that work, you know, for me became, who are the people who need us? And that has really not only honed how I approach work, but it has made me think about my relationships a little differently too. You know, who are the people I need? Who are the people who need contact with me?
Thank you for those beautiful, thoughtful answers. Any questions from the sanctuary? Please, Michael. So to repeat the question, if I heard that correctly, the past 18, 19 months have been a period where other voices can be perceived very much as antagonistic threats. Can you fill in the last part? So how has that affected your need to listen? Am I capturing your question? Thanks, Nathaniel.
You know, I talked earlier about anger, about encountering people who were angry and the effect that that had on me, and how it made me withdraw into myself. And I've been thinking about that a lot in the last couple of months in particular, when we've been in this limbo period of, or how safe are we? How okay is it to be together? What constitutes a crowd? Because I've been encountering angry people, and the more people come together, the more people are bringing those anxieties and those frustrations with them, and folks are really short-tempered. So the isolation I've been encountering your question, hasn't been so much about the politics or the vaccine mostly, but just do we lead with anger? And for me, there's been a real tension between knowing I need, that anger that I'm encountering is often somebody saying, I'm frustrated, I'm frightened, I have a need that you need to help me meet, which is a call to listen. But it's also an attack. It's often directed at the most vulnerable people at a workplace or at a retail establishment or whatever. And so I've been struggling with that a lot. How do you hear what somebody is trying to say when it's framed as hostility? And I wish I had wisdom on that. The conversation that we've been having at work is how do we remind people that the reason they come there is because it's a place of warmth and kindness. Is there a way to say, hey, everybody's here to take care of you. Let us help you. Let us make you feel joy. But it's a struggle.
There's a lot of wisdom there. Thank you, Nathaniel. Stan.
So I'd like to, it's a very tough question, as Nathaniel indicated. Judaism, I want to talk about it in context of our Jewish community. And we are a community religion. It's why, for instance, we need a minyan to say many of our prayers. Although we can pray individually, it is in community where we are strong. And I just wonder if the anger that some are feeling is due to the isolation that we've experienced over the last 18 months and the inability to interact with our community more, to talk out the things which might anger us or make us scared or make us unsure. And the only solution I see is that we all get vaccinated and we all get back together again as soon as possible.
Amen to that. The next question from Karen Wasilowski. What pre-COVID baggage are you actively letting go of? What pre-COVID baggage are you actively letting go of? Any takers? Okay, go get them, Heidi.
Is that on? No, it is. Okay, thank you. So pre-COVID baggage. Well, I remember sharing this with you, Karen, towards the end of my presidency, that I wanted the next year to be my year of being present. Present for myself, present for my family, present for my health, and just be present. I loved being president. It was an amazing experience, and it took a lot of time and effort. So I really was very intentional about entering the second year, my first year of not being president, of really being present and trying to let go of a lot of the to-do list and the things that consumed me so that I could just be present for my family. And so I have to say the to-do lists are creeping back up on the table again, but I'm trying to keep them at bay. So I think just letting go of a lot of that kind of to-do list baggage that takes you away from being present. And I'm doing more birding, and that helps too.
I think I'm letting go of a lot of expectations. I think I mentioned sort of before COVID, Tasha and I were kind of in a stage of, okay, we're making some plans for the next few years, and I have learned that life throws you curveballs, and I'm trying to learn to let go of expectations and strike this balance of how do I look ahead but not count on things to be a particular way. And then at work, we went down to about 30% of our employees for a little while, and it's a long, slow build back, and that means there are just things, processes, and things that are the way you wish things were done that you just can't. You have to concentrate on, okay, we're going to get this done, however we're going to get it done, and so letting go of anything that's not essential has been a blessing, I guess, in some ways, from this pandemic.
Stan.
Karen, I think of this question in its reverse, and I'm almost wondering whether the pandemic has caused us to create more baggage on us, to give us more things that we want to or need to do that we just haven't been able to do because of the pandemic. Not the least of which, of course, is our inability, my inability, Allison's inability to travel to see our kids who don't live near us, and not being able to. I've got a whole suitcase full of hugs and for my children and grandchildren that I haven't been able to give. So I'm wondering if it's just the opposite, is that the isolation that we've experienced, or many of us have experienced during this time, have created a great attic full of baggage that we didn't have before, and we're just going to have to figure out how to unload that sometime in the future, a better future.
Zoe, thank you.
As I said earlier, I'm really interested in tikkun olam, specifically social justice. So a big part of my life is fighting for what I believe is right and arguing and debating with people who I might disagree with. And before COVID, I really wanted to kind of change everything that I disagreed with, especially in my district. In the San Mateo Union High School district, there's a lot of inequality and discrimination, and I really tried to fight against that and make as much change as I could. And even when I couldn't make that change, I still fought, which I really enjoy, and I really like fighting for what I believe is right. But over quarantine, I kind of realized that I can't always get what I want, which was actually what my sermon was about when I was bar mitzvah. But I really realized that, yes, I need to keep fighting, but I also can't stress about this fight and spend all my time thinking about how I need to argue with argue with the machine, I guess, that's like in control. And I just really kind of, especially as a senior in my final year here before I go off to college, I've learned to enjoy the time that I have and not spend my entire time arguing with people. Yeah.
Well said, and that's a great example. And I'm so glad and impressed that you've got that fire, and thanks for putting that into action. Our next question comes from Ellie Feeder. So the question, just to repeat it for everybody, is how has this pandemic experience changed your life goals and focus? And directed first at Zoe, so we'll let you tackle that first, Zoe.
Well, I've kind of talked about this, and every time that I've come up here, in my first time that I came up here, I talked about time and how I'm learning to value time more and spend my time in a more meaningful way. And when I just came up here before, I was talking about how I am learning to, again, spend my time in more meaningful ways and not stress about things that are taking up a lot of my time. And I think that's one of the values that has changed the most in my life, valuing how I'm spending my time and how I kind of use my time to benefit myself and also others. But more specifically to moving on, I guess, I've kind of accepted that I won't be in Burlingame my entire life, and I not necessarily need to move on because I know that I can always come back to Burlingame and have a community here, but I need to really work towards my future. And I've always kind of accepted that I've always accepted that I am moving out of Burlingame and that I will have a different future without my friends that I've known since kindergarten or without the community that I've built here. But recently it's really been setting in. I just had my first college counselor meeting this past week. And while we were discussing where I'm applying early decision to, she said that most early decisions, schools, you have to apply by November 1st. And that's in 2 months. So that's happening really soon. I'm making my decision really soon. And of course, that's very stressful, but I know that wherever I go, I'll be happy. And if I'm not happy, then I can go somewhere else. And like I was saying with community, even though I have such a strong community here, I know that this community, not only this community will follow me, but I can build a community wherever I go as well. And if I ever get lonely, I can tune into Friday night Zoom services at PTS, or Zoom with an old teacher at Burlingame, or call my friends and family and see what's happening in Burlingame. So thank you.
Yasher koach. Those are great things to know about yourself. Anybody else want to answer that one? Okay. Any other questions from either those who are following on Zoom or here? Great, Davida.
Dan talked a little bit about some of the changes that have resulted because of COVID, for example, doing Zoom services and people that are now able to attend who couldn't before. So I'm going to categorize that as maybe a silver lining, and I'm wondering if you all want to talk about any of the silver linings that have come out of your experience.
Thank you. So to repeat that, what are some of the silver linings that may have come out of this experience? We'll start with Heidi.
So I would say lots of silver linings, definitely. Once we realized that Zoom was available, I've ended up connecting with a lot of people that I didn't connect with regularly. And every Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, I have a call with a group of magnificent women across the country. And we started that last March or April, and we've continued it. And the same thing with other friends of mine that I have regular calls with. And we realized this is such a beautiful way to connect. We don't need a pandemic to keep connecting. And so I think part of the silver linings are finding the connections and the ways of connecting that work during the pandemic. And there's no reason to stop them just because we're sort of coming out of the pandemic. So that's one of the silver linings. As some people have mentioned, Nathaniel, just being able to spend more time with family has been a huge blessing. And getting to do a lot of walking. That has been a lot of one of the silver linings as well.
Thank you, Heidi. Anybody else want to take that one on? Stan.
So I think I have to piggyback on what Heidi said. So maybe a little bit on Zoe as well in the beginning, is that the pandemic has given us more time. So the question is, what are you going to do with that time? And I know early on in the pandemic, I did connect with friends I hadn't communicated with maybe in years. And those were all very pleasurable connections. And I think, does it take a pandemic to pick up the phone or to text to someone whom you haven't connected with in years? And the answer is no, it shouldn't take a pandemic, but I think my experience has been fairly common, of the idea of reconnecting with people with whom we've not had any contact. So the time has been a gift. And the question is, what do we do with that gift? And as I said, for me, a lot of that gift has been spent in reading. And I wish I could remember a tenth of what I'm reading, but I get great pleasure from reading. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Stan. Nathaniel.
So first and most importantly, we now have a full game closet of games that my boys have learned to trash me at. So maybe that's a silver lining for them. But I have been thrilled to just find that there are opportunities to connect with my kids about weird little passions that we didn't know we shared or didn't know we had. I find a YouTube video about songs in 7/4 time, and that sent us down a rabbit hole. And we've been Tuvia and I have been geeking out over history podcasts together. So just finding those shared enthusiasms has been a huge silver lining.
That's really lovely. Thank you. Zoe.
So I am currently senior class president of my school, and I've actually been class president for all 4 years at Burlingame High. And if you have ever heard anything about Burlingame High, the one thing that you've probably heard is that we have no spirit whatsoever. Very, very small groups of people go to any games other than the football game. I've never seen anybody go to a tennis match, and nobody dresses up for Spirit Days. Nobody really wants to put themselves out there and have that vulnerability where you might be wearing a crazy hat for Crazy Hat Day. Nobody really does that at Burlingame. But just in the last month of being at school, I've already seen so many people really putting themselves out there for Spirit Days or for Red Out Days, or just during Friday lunch activities. We really, because we missed that connection last year when we were all on Zoom and we didn't have that opportunity to see each other at the Friday night football games or see each other wearing funky socks for Funky Sock Day. A lot of people are really participating in spirit events and connecting with one another over their weird shoes or connecting with each other over attending the lacrosse games. And so it's really amazing for me as just a student at Burlingame, but also a senior class president, to see people really connecting. And so I would definitely say that's one of the silver linings as a high schooler, being able to see groups of people maybe from the popular group and groups of people from a maybe not as popular group connecting with each other over things that they would have never done sophomore year or freshman year.
That's great to hear. Good work, Madam President. 4 years running. Any other questions, either over Zoom or here? Well, I want to thank our 4 panelists, Stan Mainzer, Heidi Schell, Nathaniel Bergson-Michelson, and Zoe Steinberger. Thank you so much for being such great role models for this greater community. Thank you for sharing of yourselves. Thank you for sharing your philosophy, in some cases your theology. And thank you for being vulnerable with all of us. So how about a round of applause? And thank you also to Connor and to Karen for the audio-visual help and technical assistance with the questions. We're going to take about a 40-minute break before Yizkor starts at 3 p.m. So once again, Yizkor starts at 3 p.m. and Yizkor will be followed by the healing service and then by the Ne'ilah service. Gamar Tov, everybody.